Hey there, folks. Can you all see and hear me? All right, cool. Thanks a lot for coming out today, everybody. We are going to continue on doing some fly to learn, and we will ideally get to start actually using Xplane today. Hopefully, we got everything all set up yesterday or Monday um, with getting the stuff downloaded. So hopefully, everybody's got it. The demo ready and everything. So, real quick, raise your hand if you do not have Xplane 9 downloaded. Okay, wonderful. That's what I was hoping for. So today what we're going to be, oops, I see a question. You're just finished downloading? For real? Wow. When you open Xplane, you don't have the plane we're using. And I'm going to help you be able to switch planes. Um, the one that's default is not the one we're looking for. So I'll show you everything, um, getting it set up in just a second here. You have Xplane 10, you missed the last webinar. 10's a little bit different. You should be able to get away with it just, at least for this class, if not for future classes, but we are using 9 specifically. There are some different capabilities. Um, you should be able to follow along. I'm not sure about the exact equivalence if you're using 10. But today we are going to be practicing takeoffs, discussing a couple of the 4 forces that are experienced in a plane and by a plane in flight, and specifically we're going to talk about weight and if there's time about lift. You just tried to open it and it said it didn't download properly. Didn't you have it work in last class? Oh, you didn't? Try opening it again. Because I don't want you to have to re-download that, because obviously that didn't work out too well. With the whole downloading thing didn't work out too well, rather. Yeah, just try opening it again. If it still doesn't work, uh, you're just gonna have to re-download it again. So the Cessna has a 3D cockpit setting that allows you to look around in it. Yeah, there's actually a couple of settings that you can use, but I didn't actually know about the 3D cockpit setting. Which button would you press to get to that one? Or is it in the options menu? You got it working? Maybe? Oh, you're using a controller, I gotcha. Okay. Well, for everybody else, I do want you to go ahead and open up Xplane, um, if you haven't already, obviously. So let me know if it does end up working for you or not, Andrew. So some of you might have noticed that you don't automatically start with the plane that we're going to be using. So it's not working for you either. Hmm. You've tried trying to reopen it again, right? You say it's not working. Have you tried to open it one more time? Three times? Oh, geez, okay. I'm trying to think. Does it give you any sort of errors, Cameron? And the question is, how do you make the camera zoom out? It's, what is it, A? Yeah. No errors, it just crashes. Hmm. I'm just trying to think, sorry. Did you have it working before? No? Alright. In the next lab, we are going to be giving you out the Fly to Learn discs. So if the demo doesn't work, we can give you the discs for it, and hopefully that'll work on your computer. As for it just immediately crashing, I'm not entirely sure how to fix that, or if there's any solution. So I guess it's just going to be one of those things where you follow along with me. Now the plane that I have on my screen right now is the Cessna 172. And I'll show you to get to that in just a second. Now another question. What model plane, or not that, never mind. You have it working, it says firewalls block some features of it on public and private networks. Such as Homer work or public. Private networks. Your computer doesn't have a disk drive. While you're thinking of it, what do you use to record the webinars? I use Snagit 12 for it. Usually. Sometimes I do use the webinar software proper to do it if I don't have Snagit on the computer I'm using. Yeah, no worries. If there's no disk drive, there's a way to mount it onto your computer using a USB. That's starting to get a little bit complex though, and I'll talk to Mr. D about that. So alright. So if you've got X-Plane open, you'll see a cockpit. It might not look like this, but we're going to make it look like this. We're going to switch it over to the Cessna 172 Skyhawk. And the question is, you hear people talking on the radio. What is that? It sounds real. I'm not sure if the demo version has this, but the full version does have actual life radio chatter from airplanes. So this is actually real airplane talk that you're hearing if you do have your radio on your plane. Yeah, it's really cool. I think it's kind of amazing that technology lets us do that. So anyways, what you'll notice is if you move your mouse towards the top of the screen, a set of options will pop up on the screen. What we're going to want to do is go to Settings, and then scroll down to Quick Flight Setup. Here we're going to set up our airplane, airport, weather, every variable that we will need. So Settings, and then Quick Flight Setup. And you might notice that I went over this briefly last class, but because we did not have our versions running quite yet, I just sort of went over it without explaining, how it all works. So we're going to want to choose a certain airport called Innsbruck-Krattabitten, which has the airport sign LOWI. You can actually just type it into this bar here if you're not already there. Make sure you highlight it. You can click on Go to this airport, but you'll need to go back into the Quick Flight Settings menu. As long as you've got it highlighted, though, you won't need to click Go to this airport. So you also notice that a little bit of information on the airport appears, specifically its elevation and the schematic for its runways and I guess buildings on the airport. No big deal. Question, doesn't matter what plane you have at this moment. We will be switching planes in just a second here. So right now it does not matter what plane you've got. So by default, underneath all these airport options, you'll see options that say takeoff and final approach. The default will be the very first runway that appears, which in this case is runway 08. Are we just going to go over the basics right now? Yeah, sort of. I'm trying to go a little bit faster than slow, though. So, so we're going to be using runway 08. We don't have to worry about clicking any of these things. You'll also notice these distances, 3 nm and 10 nm. That's for landing. That's in nautical miles. And that's okay, Sam, if you need to. At this point, we're going to change our aircraft to make sure that we do use the Cessna. I can't talk. Goodness. The Cessna 172 SP. So how we get to that is by clicking Open Aircraft. So you might be at somewhere else or something else here. So let me just go to a very baseline part of this folder. What you need to do to navigate through this file menu, it's kind of weird. You'll actually have to click on the arrows at the top of your screen. Alright, and that's okay, Sam. Yeah, no problem. So let's navigate to the aircraft subfolder. Double click on General Aviation. Double click on Cessna 172 SP. You're also using X-Plane 10 though, right? You're not? Oh, that's what you were trying to tell me earlier, wasn't it? Do you have any airplane that looks sort of like that Cessna? You only have a jet? That's weird. Because it's going to be a little bit different for a jet versus the airplane we're using. I guess for now you're just going to... You can either use the jet, or you can just watch me. I can't guarantee I can tell you how the jet flies, though. So anyway, Cessna 172 SP, then double click Cessna 172 SP.acf. Alright, probably a good call. Once you click on that, you will see an icon of the plane. Then you can go ahead and open it. And from here, we're just going to double check that we don't have any weather, you don't need to touch the clouds. You want to click on CAVOK, CAVOK, which just makes it really far visibility. You want to have no weather. And we're going to change the time to be about 8 a.m. using the slider at the bottom. Everything else should be good to go. So double check that yours is looking like mine. And I'm going to give you the procedure for taking off. You got it? Alright, excellent. So I can always go back to this if you need it, so let me... Okay, I'll wait just one more second for you to get those settings. Alright, cool. So once you've gotten all these, you can click on the X at the top of your the window, and I will give you the procedure to take off. So before we do anything, we want to pause the simulation by hitting the letter P on your keyboard. That just makes sure we can get everything set up, so we're not trying to do everything while the plane is in motion. Now right underneath where it says pause, and I'm going to unpause mine for a second, you'll see just a tiny little crosshair here. Go ahead and click on or near it, and you'll see a white square appear around these crosshairs. If you move your mouse around with your game unpaused, specifically up and down, you'll notice that the view ever so slightly changes. The controls for up and down are inverted, meaning that if you want to point your nose down, you'll need to move your mouse above the crosshair. If you want to move your nose up, which we will be doing for liftoff, you'll need to move your mouse underneath the crosshairs. And it does make sense because that's actually how real airplanes function. Alright, so go ahead and pause it. We just want to make sure that white squares around the crosshairs. What we want to do next is turn off the brakes. So I think you could just click the brake light to turn them off, or you can click the B button on your keyboard. You want to make sure that the brake light is not lit up. Now I see there's a herd of deer on your landing strip. I don't actually know if you can strike deer. I know you can strike birds though. Which is catastrophic, not a good thing. So finally, if your screen is like mine and you have to use the down arrow to get to your throttle, we're going to go down to the throttle, push that guy all the way in, and we're going to get ready to go. So throttle, brakes, and the square are what we're looking for. Does anybody remember what speed I told you to lift off at last class? Well, full speed, yeah. But specifically, 80 is a little bit high. I would even probably go closer to 70, 75. But you're going to be using, remember, the green airspeed indicator to check that out. To look at the throttle, if your screen is like mine, doesn't go all the way down, click the down arrow on your keyboard and it'll move your view down. Or you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse to throttle up or down. And I think you can use the plus or minus symbols, I think. So square, brakes, throttle, we're ready to go. Before you hit P to unpause, make sure that you have your mouse cursor roughly where the crosshairs are. Before I go, I just want to remind you, you want to point your nose sort of towards the ground when you first lift off, so you want to start just a little bit above the crosshairs. Once you hit 70, 75 knots, you want to move your mouse underneath the crosshairs to lift off. Okay. Do I know what the buttons are for rudders? I don't think that there are any specific buttons in this. Well, I'm trying to think. I don't think there is a rudder button. I think it's literally just your mouse going to the left or to the right is what makes you turn. Yeah, I don't think it's a button thing. So go ahead and watch me first. I'm going to unpause it. Notice my mouse is just a little bit, oh goodness, above, so my nose is still pointing at the ground. You're going to want to try to take off straight, so you might need to adjust just a little bit. So 60 knots, 75. I'm going to move my mouse down, and I'm going to pause it because I am now in flight. So does anybody want to see that again? That whole process? Okay, so I'll show you one more time. Can't remember how to restart the Normally what I do is crash to restart, so woo! I think there's a better way to do it. I've always found crashing to be fun though. So, alright. First thing we do is pause by clicking the P button. We turn off our brakes. We push our throttle all the way in. And we make sure that we have the box around our crosshairs. So pause, brakes, throttle, crosshair. So when I unpause it, I want my mouse to be a little bit above the crosshairs. I'm going to have to adjust so that I'm going straight. So for mine, it's wanting to go left. So I'm going to move my mouse towards the upper right to keep it going relatively straight. Waiting for 70, 75. Gonna move my mouse up or down so I can fly upwards. And then I'm gonna pause it. You are heading towards the fence and not the air. Well, you probably ran off the runway. You might not be going quick enough. It's not letting you take off. What is it doing? Is it veering to one of the sides? Is your throttle pushed in? Is your brakes turned off? Are you unpaused? The throttle is not the red one. The throttle is the black one. So if you think it's the red one, that's probably why you're not moving. For this next lesson I'm doing today, we're going to need to get good at doing consistent takeoffs. So I do want you to give it a little practice, just a couple takeoffs, just to make sure you can do it consistently. You're still not moving? Do you have a light that says generator on right here? Alright, you do. So what that means is, I'm not entirely sure what that means, to be honest. But it's not going to let you move if that light is on. I think it means that the alternate power is on, just keeping the electronics on, but not powering the plane's stuff itself. So to restart, oh goodness, no. Like I said, I always crashed to restart, so wonder if there is a restart button. That would be kind of helpful, wouldn't it? You press get you lost and then crash. That'll work. Or what you could do is go to quick flight setup, click on runway 08, it'll restart you. So I will give you about 4 minutes to do a couple practices taking off. And if you want to try taking off in other planes, like I said, I don't know necessarily the controls for them, but it could be fun. So I'm just going to do a couple. And like I said, this does just take practice. You might not be good at it immediately. I'm still terrible at it, and I've used this software a lot, so. Woohoo! It's fun doing flips. Yeah, this airplane wasn't necessarily designed to do that. But yeah, you can dream. Yeah, normally planes that do flips will have their wings attached to the bottom. So you see how this one has the wings attached to the top. That makes the planes a lot more stable to fly, a lot easier to fly, a lot less likely to stall. Alright, you press get me lost and now you can't get back to the right aircraft. Then let's go back into settings and then the quick flight setup to take us back to our airport to get back to our aircraft. Oops, that is way too small. So while you're getting a little bit of practice in, I'm going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about, oh yeah, can you say that again? You're having technical difficulties? Yes, I'll say that one more time. If you go to settings and then the quick flight setup, you can change your airport back to where you are and change your aircraft back to the initial one. Can y'all still hear me? Okay. So you can do some practicing taking off while I'm lecturing this. But what I said earlier, Andrew, is just to go to quick flight setup, which is underneath settings, and switching back to LOWI, airport, and change back to your Cessna. So we're going to talk about the forces that are experienced by an airplane in flight. Very appropriate Star Wars reference. Hope everyone's excited about more Star Wars. Only a couple more weeks. Yeah, I'm very excited. So when a plane is flying, there are four forces that it's experiencing. Thrust, which acts forward on it. Drag, which is caused by the plane itself as well as air resistance. Lift, which is what makes the plane essentially fly. And not quite gravity, but weight. So gravity is not a force, y'all. Weight is a force. Gravity is an acceleration. Weight is going to be the force that we discussed today. So this guy, Isaac Newton, I'm sure y'all have known, you've heard about him before. I'm sure you've heard about his laws. The second of his three important laws is that a force is equivalent to a mass times an acceleration. Gravity is an acceleration, a plane has mass, bam, weight is a force. So again, it's just mass times gravity, that's weight. And the weight of the plane includes the mass of both the plane and the payload. Can anybody take a guess as to what a payload of an aircraft would entail? So the plane itself is just the skin, the seats, all the instruments, just stuff that's built in. What about a payload? Any ideas of what could be constituted as a payload? Cargo. Perfect. Exactly. Cargo can be people, cargo can be objects. That's actually literally it, with the exception of the fuel. The fuel could, go into either of these categories, plane or payload, but since fuel is a little bit dependent on payload, let's just consider the payload just to be the cargo of the plane. All right. Here we go. You've done the X-plane lesson twice? Yeah. Yeah. Well, at least you know, so we can keep going forward with the class, right? Anyways, the direction of weight is perpendicular and into the Earth along the flight path, so obviously it's acting against, or not against, but opposite of lift, which goes up, and perpendicularly to thrust and drag. So what we're going to do now, and I hope you've gotten a couple of good liftoffs in there, we're going to do a quick experiment and see how the weight of the aircraft and payload affects the takeoff distance. So you hopefully already have your Cessna and the airport Lowy ready and everything. So what I want you to do is go into settings and then data input and output. So I just went to settings and then data input and output. So unlike in a real life aircraft, the simulator is really nice because there's all sorts of different options that you can enable that are detected by your instruments but are a lot more specific. Okay? So specifically what we're going to want to do is enable the speed data as well as the distance traveled data. So you'll see a whole bunch of checkboxes and everything. I want you to click the two right checkboxes beside speeds, which is line 3. And the two rightmost checkboxes on line 21, which say lock, vel, dist traveled. Alright, these are just the two that we're looking for. The other ones are a little bit more advanced options, which lets you read data to your disk and to the internet, I think. So we're only looking for these last two. So what that's going to do, it will add a couple of different options up to the upper left, as you've been seeing on mine. There'll be 2 bars. One will say vind, vtrue, vtrue, yada yada yada. The other will say xyz, vx, vy, vz, dist, dist. Now, you're saying it doesn't like you having the demo, it sent a message and crashed. Was it just the 10-minute warning? Since you can only do 10 minutes of this at a time with the demo? Yes, that's it. You can just open it again. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure our takeoff distance with our current payload. So we're not going to change anything. To do this, we're going to do a liftoff just like I showed you before, But as soon as um, you lift your nose up and you start going into the air, you're going to pause. All right, so I'm going to say that one more time. You're going to lift off just like you have before. Right when you lift off, right when you move your nose upwards, you're going to hit the P button on your keyboard. Okay? So I want you to do that right now. In the second sort of data menu, the second from the right says dist and then blank feet. I want you to tell me right when you lift off how far, or yeah, how many feet that it took you to take off. So lift off, pause, tell me that number. Okay, I got 2810. Anyone else? 1280. And that's funny because it really just depends on how good you are at this, which is why I suggest you do 2 more runs and take the average of that. But the first data point doesn't mean anything without your second data point. So go ahead and try that 2 more times. And to those that told me your numbers, go ahead and tell me the numbers once again. And I'll take some sort of average of them and see where we're at. How can you get the numbers? If you go into settings and then data input and output, if you click the on line 21, click the rightmost checkboxes, and the number is going to be right here. It'll say dist for distance and then a number of feet. So 1598, that's looking a little bit more reasonable. I'm going to go ahead and, for simplicity's sake, the next time you got less than 300 meters, that's pretty impressive, actually. I'm getting some crazy numbers going on here. Oh no, we're going for distance. We're just doing distance. So in fact, I'll just do a quick one myself. Well, it's not supposed to be low. It's literally just what you're comfortable with. Trying to get to a velocity of 70 knots before we lift off. See, I'm like in the thousands here. You can definitely lift off a little bit earlier. I got 1300, for example. You could take off earlier, but I'm looking for you to get to about 70 knots. I'm just going to take mine for now because I'm getting all sorts of different information. With 1300 feet, whatever you get could be a lot more, could be a lot less. As long as you're making sure you get to 70 knots before you lift off, we'll be good. So what about if we added more weight to our payload? So let me show you to do that real quick so you can actually, see it. You're going to go into aircraft and click on weight and fuel. And the third row says payload weight. That's what we're going to be changing. By default, our payload weight is 298. Let's move that guy up to about 600, or as close as you can get. And let's reset and try it again. So it has a tab in the middle of your screen that says demo and says to use the keys to explain. Just close out and open it back up again. That's just the 10-minute lockout. So we just made our payload a little bit heavier. And we're going to try lifting off a couple more times. So I want you to lift off 3 times with this 600-pound payload. I want you guys to tell me either your average or one of the numbers you get. So I do want you to try to practice taking off effectively and consistently, since we will be doing this quite a lot. So I got 18, 15. Little low, but I do think that's reasonable. Any other takers? If not, that'll be just fine. We can use that one. So if I were to raise my payload to 900 pounds, what do you think will happen? Will it get longer to take off or shorter to take off? Still seems a little bit short, Sam, but if that's what you got, it's what you got, so. Exactly. It's going to take longer to take off. So let's go ahead. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to do all 3 liftoffs, but I do want you to practice at some point. Let's go ahead and try to change our payload weight up to 900. And see how long it gets there. It's right, it is going to be longer. But let's see what specifically y'all get for that number. Any numbers for 900? I'm sure you'll start working on 600, but I'm just saying. So having not gotten any numbers, I'm going to do an engineering thing called extrapolation. Because I've done this before, I know the answer to this, but if you were to plot how far it took versus the payload weight, you would see that it's called a linear relationship, meaning that an increase in so many pounds always leads to an increase in so many feet. So that's actually really a lot higher than I would expect it, actually. I was going to say about 2,300 based on the 1,300 and 1,800. But again, I guess it does just depend on piloting skills. But basically, every single pound will cause a marked change or the same increase in takeoff length. All right. Okay. So yeah, still getting a variety of numbers here, so pretty cool at how different it is for everyone. So um, where was it gonna go? So let's do that whole question thing we did last class. I just answered these questions, so let's hope that you remember it. As your payload increases, does your takeoff distance increase or decrease? Yep, it increases. Does a longer takeoff distance indicate more or less payload? Yep, more payload. Now, something that I didn't really tell you to take into account while you're doing this, does the airspeed go up or down as you increase the payload? Yep. And that's because it's using its power to carry more weight, so it can't gain as much lift, and we'll talk about that in just a minute actually. And do larger airplanes require larger airstrips? I got a yes and I got a not always. The answer I'm supposed to tell you is yes. Not always is probably a little bit more accurate because it really depends on a lot of different factors that we're not even considering. So for example, if we have a really, really strong headwind, or not headwind, sorry. Is it headwind? Let me think about that for a sec. Yeah, if we have a larger headwind, so the wind's coming at the nose of the airplane, we can take off on a lot shorter of an airstrip. But in general, large airplane, large airstrip. Okay? So with the last couple minutes of class, what do I want to do? Do I want to get started on this next one? Yeah, I'll do a little introduction to lift. Yeah, I'll go ahead on that. So we talked about weight, which is the force that acts downwards towards the ground while the plane is in flight. Now we're going to talk about lift, which is the force that acts upward on the plane's wing. Okay, so lift is very explanatory as to what it is. It's literally the amount of force caused to lift, or sorry, the amount of force that lifts up the airplane. That's lift. So I'm going to get more into this next class, next Monday, but we're going to be talking about lift itself. We're going to be doing a lot of stalling, not just twiddling our thumbs, like Cameron was saying last class, but the actual situation of what happens when an aircraft stalls, and some theories that will explain why lift happens. So we always made jokes about how now that we have a degree in aerospace, it makes less sense than it ever did before. And it's true, because other than the theories that we have as to why planes fly, we don't actually know why planes fly or how. They just do and we deal with it. I'll get more into that in a little bit, and by that I mean probably next class. But we don't know why planes fly. We don't know how lift happens, but it does, and so we can guess. So obviously, like I showed you, yeah, that could totally be like a GIF with the glasses falling on the plane. Deal with it. But lift does act perpendicularly to the direction of flight, so it's going to move along the same axis as gravity except in the opposite direction. So lift does result from a difference of air pressure along the wing, we think. Probably. Who knows? I guess both theories do use that as their example, but still. It's up and perpendicular to the flight path. It's sensitive to airspeed over the wing and the angle of attack of your wing. So it's a really cool name for something that's not as cool as it sounds. When I talk about angle of attack, I mean the angle of the aircraft to the wind, basically. So what I mean is, when you are flying at cruising altitude, you'll probably not have very much angle of attack because you are not going up or down or anything. You're just flying. But when you're lifting off, you will need to have to move your nose up so that more lift will be able to be generated on the wings. So I don't know if I'll get to tell you specifically how that happens, but increasing the angle of attack, so moving your nose up further and further, will increase lift to a point. If I put my nose too far up, suddenly the amount of lift will decrease rapidly, and that's what we call a stall. So I'm going to show you something that will work more with next class. Right now, go back into your X-plane. We're going to go to Special. Hang on a second. Make sure I got this right. Okay. We're going to go to Special, and then we're going to click on Show Flight Model, which is the very top option here. And then we're going to click A on our keyboard. I'm going to rotate around real quick just to show you. We're not in the air right now, so the wings aren't producing any lift, but you can tell if I... Oops, let me see if I can zoom in any. Nope. But you can tell that there are some weird white lines that'll appear. That's basically lift, but all that's going on now is the propeller. So if I were to lift off, so click on W to get back into your cockpit. Oops, I probably should have waited to take the brakes off there. So real quick, I'm just going to show you this and we'll do it together next class. Do a nice solid lift off here. Taking its sweet time right now. So I'm going to pause it real quick. I'm going to show you the plane's view. What you'll see is what we call lift vectors. That's these green things along the length of the plane. Or along the length of the wings, rather. So what we're going to be doing next class is seeing how the lift changes when we alter our speed and our angle of attack. And we'll also work some with thrust. I think we'll get to that next class. But yeah, we're going to have a good next class. So any questions, y'all? Sorry I kept y'all a little bit late today. So thanks a bunch for coming out. You are free to leave. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you have enjoyed the lesson so far. You're welcome, Andrew.